Kash Patel sat quietly in the back of the Senate Intelligence Committee room, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the panel. Though no longer part of the administration, his presence sparked whispers throughout the chamber. Something about the thick manila envelope in his hand made even the most seasoned staffers shift uneasily. He didn't speak until Senator Granger called him to testify. The cameras clicked as he walked to the microphone. A former chief of staff at the Department of Defense, Patel was no stranger to high-level secrets, but today, his tone was different. Almost surgical. "Before I proceed," Kash began, "I want to be clear. What I'm about to reveal doesn't just involve political misjudgment, it points to a coordinated cover-up that spans entertainment, finance, and the highest levels of government." The room fell silent. Patel pulled a folded document from the envelope and held it up. "This is an internal communication, verified, between a major entertainment executive and a former senior official during the Obama administration. What you'll see in these exchanges raises serious questions about influence, power, and buried connections the American people were never supposed to know about." Journalists leaned in. Staffers texted furiously. Then he dropped the names. One of them was Sean Combs, known publicly as Diddy. The other? Barack Obama. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. "This isn't a conspiracy theory," Patel continued. "This is documentation. Financial trails. Private jet logs. Conversations caught in unredacted transcripts." He placed a copy of the document on the record and locked eyes with the chairman. "And that's just the beginning." As the committee clerk scanned and submitted the documents into the official record, Kash Patel calmly took a sip of water. The room had turned frigid, tension thick in the air. Lawmakers, some trying to maintain poker faces, were already whispering to aides behind them. Senator Granger leaned forward. "Mr. Patel, are you asserting that a former president and a major media figure were involved in a coordinated scheme?" "I'm not asserting," Patel replied. "I'm presenting proof." He opened the envelope again, revealing a second set of papers, this time laced with corporate logos, bank transfer stamps, and communication metadata. A single name at the top stood out, Aurora Global Initiatives, a shadowy nonprofit with almost no public footprint. This front organization was registered offshore in 2011. Ostensibly humanitarian in purpose, but behind the scenes. Kash tapped the paper. It funneled millions into entertainment-backed social programs that somehow ended up in private investment portfolios and overseas accounts. "Whose portfolios?" Senator Whitman asked, skeptically. Patel didn't hesitate. "Sean Combs. Barack Obama. A few others I'll name in closed session." The senator raised an eyebrow. "You're implying they enriched themselves under the guise of activism?" "No," Kash said, voice calm but sharp. "I'm saying they built an empire of leverage. They bought silence. Loyalty. And they made sure no one asked questions, not the press, not the auditors, not even Congress." Screens behind the panel flickered as staff uploaded a diagram Kash had submitted, a flowchart showing the intricate connections between media companies, political PACs, shell NGOs, and celebrity foundations. At the center was a triangle, Obama, Diddy, Aurora. And under it, a handwritten phrase, "They kept the lights off." "I'm flipping the switch." After a brief recess, the hearing resumed behind closed doors. Cameras off. Phones confiscated. What Kash Patel was about to reveal wasn't for the public, not yet. The committee members leaned in as Kash pulled out a USB drive and passed it to the tech team. Moments later, surveillance footage, travel manifests, and encrypted text message logs filled the screen. The date in the corner read June 14, 2016. "That's the night of the fundraiser in Beverly Hills," Patel began. Officially, it was about civic engagement. Unofficially, it was about consolidating power. On screen, a sleek black jet landed at Van Nuys Airport. The passenger list was redacted, until Patel handed over the decryption key. Names appeared. Sean Combs. Barack Obama. A top entertainment lawyer. 2 foreign nationals under FISA surveillance. Why would a sitting president attend an unofficial, off-the-books event with foreign intelligence targets? Senator Granger asked. That's the question, Kash replied. Because what happened inside that mansion wasn't a fundraiser. It was a negotiation. He pressed a button. Screens changed. Now, security footage from inside the estate. Laughter. Champagne. No press. Just powerful people in shadowy corners. And in one room, a private study, Combs and Obama, alone with 2 men identified as intermediaries tied to offshore asset holdings. The deal was simple, Patel explained. Access in exchange for insulation. They were laying the groundwork for a post-administration media empire, and a global influence pipeline. Senator Whitman shook his head. You're saying Obama leveraged his final year in office to build a soft power network with private funding? Not just funding, Kash said. Control. Over narratives. Over distribution channels. And yes, over people. A stunned silence filled the chamber. These aren't accusations, Kash added, holding up more documentation. These are receipts. The silence in the chamber was shattered by the sharp sound of a door closing as a new figure entered the room. Grayer, nervous, mid-40s, he wore a dark blazer and carried a sealed binder. This, Kash said, is the reason I came forward now. He was part of the inner circle. Until they turned on him. Senator Granger looked wary. Your name, sir? The man hesitated. I'll only go on record as Colfax. That's what they called me in the files anyway. I was hired as a strategic liaison between Aurora Global Initiatives and a West Coast media group owned by Combs. Kash nodded. Colfax was responsible for facilitating communications between the NGO and key donors, including international contributors that were never disclosed under FEC regulations. Colfax stepped forward and opened the binder. Inside were hard copies of email threads, photo stills from encrypted messaging platforms, and one chilling memo dated October 2016. This is a direct order, Colfax said. Signed by a now-retired White House aide. It instructed our team to eliminate all digital trails between Aurora and 2 shell corporations that were laundering funds through entertainment ventures. Why would the White House be involved in that? Senator Whitman asked, visibly shaken. Colfax didn't blink. Because if the press ever connected those shell companies to Obama's post-presidency foundation plans, everything would fall apart. And Diddy? He wasn't just a partner, he was the gatekeeper. He opened doors in media, music, tech. They needed him to control the flow of culture. He needed them to shield his investments. Then he dropped the final bomb. I was there the night the insurance drive was made, when Diddy recorded private conversations. Not for protection. For leverage. The room froze. Kash leaned forward. That's right. There are tapes. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Obama. Diddy. World leaders. Billionaires. What they said behind closed doors could bring down careers, even empires. The lights dimmed slightly as a staffer projected a still image from one of the recordings Colfax referenced. It was blurry, but recognizable, a private lounge in Geneva. In the corner, unmistakable, sat Sean Combs, a cigar in hand. Beside him, Barack Obama, partially obscured by shadow. 2 other unidentified men leaned in, speaking intently. There are over a dozen of these, Kash Patel said. And they were never supposed to surface. Senator Granger adjusted her glasses. Where are the recordings now? In secure custody, Kash answered. But copies were distributed. Diddy kept them as insurance. Obama's team tried to bury them after leaving office. Too late. The files were already out. Colfax opened the binder again and revealed a transcript from one of the recordings. The dialogue was coded, but clear in intent: keep the optics clean, he'll get the award. But make sure the board signs off before we move the capital. He'll go along. He wants in. But it has to look like an honor. Not a payoff. Granger read it twice. Who's he? Patel answered calmly. A media mogul who later received a Presidential Medal of Freedom. The board referred to in this conversation was a private advisory group within Aurora, handpicked by Diddy and aligned with the former administration's post office goals. Unreal, a senator whispered. Colfax leaned forward. They built their influence not just with money, but with recognition. Awards, platforming, publishing deals, Netflix contracts. They didn't just control the game, they wrote the rules. And the tapes? Whitman asked. Do they mention anything illegal? Kash gave a slow nod. Some walk the line. Some cross it. Coordinated suppression of dissenting artists. Political blacklisting. Diverted funds from government-affiliated grants to private estates. The room was deathly quiet. I'm not saying they committed treason, Kash concluded. I'm saying they monetized trust, weaponized celebrity, and engineered silence. A large monitor flickered on as Patel loaded another slide. This one was titled, The Silence Machine. Inside the celebrity blacklist, across the screen were names, musicians, journalists, actors, even a former congressman. Some had been vocal critics of the Obama administration. Others had spoken out against Diddy's ventures. All of them had one thing in common: they vanished from mainstream platforms within months of speaking up. This wasn't just public relations, Patel explained. This was strategic erasure. Colfax took over. They used an internal Aurora directive codenamed Project Radiance. It identified high-risk individuals who posed a threat to their narrative control. Once flagged, these targets saw sudden drops in press visibility, sponsorships revoked, shows cancelled. We're talking lives dismantled. He pointed to the list on the screen. Some of them never knew why it happened. One journalist went from 2 Emmy nominations to being unable to land freelance gigs. Another, a whistleblower in the nonprofit sector, had their bank accounts frozen after being falsely flagged for fraud. Senator Granger shook her head. Are you saying this was done with federal support? Indirectly, Kash replied. The digital infrastructure came through private contractors, some of whom had been awarded federal cybersecurity contracts. They weren't just building tools for national defense. They were also building firewalls around a growing empire. He clicked again, and a chart appeared, linking Aurora's board members with media executives and algorithm managers from major tech firms. It was all coordinated. A soft power kill switch. If someone got too close, too loud, poof. Gone. Granger exhaled, visibly disturbed. This is bigger than we imagined. Colfax nodded. It always was. Patel ended with a quiet warning, and if they've done it to others, don't think they won't do it to us. Senator Whitman slammed a pen on the table. This isn't just unethical, this is weaponized influence laundering. Kash Patel nodded and slid a new document across the table, a spreadsheet titled, Crossfire Holdings, Disbursement Schedule. Follow the money, Kash said calmly. That's what exposed it all. The spreadsheet listed dozens of transactions routed through layered LLCs, shell corporations, and seemingly charitable trusts, most of them tied back to either Aurora Global Initiatives or one of Combs' media subsidiaries. Crossfire Holdings was the master switch, Patel explained. From 2013 to 2019, it quietly pushed over $82 million through various fronts into pet projects, campaign-related PACs, and yes, private ventures masked as community uplift programs. Senator Granger narrowed her eyes. Whose name is on the ownership file? Technically. Patel smirked. No one. It's a ghost entity. But we traced digital fingerprints. Diddy's legal team set up the architecture. And Obama's former transition director oversaw compliance, or rather, the illusion of it. Colfax pointed to one column. See these references? Civic Innovation Labs. That's code. Those were media pods designed to manufacture narratives, train influencers, and pump curated talking points into viral platforms, all under the guise of digital outreach. Who were the targets? Asked Senator Whitman. Conservatives. Moderate liberals. Foreign press. Anyone who strayed from the pre-approved messaging. It was all packaged as progress. Kash paused, then added, and a portion of those funds went toward retaining firms specializing in surveillance tech, not just to monitor dissent, but to predict it. Stunned silence. Colfax closed the binder slowly. They called it proactive narrative stabilization. We called it what it was, manipulation at scale. Granger sat back, whispering, they built a state within a state. Patel didn't deny it. Correction, he said. They built a throne. Who else was in on it? Senator Granger asked sharply. Kash Patel didn't answer with words, he tapped his finger on the next page of the dossier. A photo appeared on the monitor, a secret gathering at a secluded estate in Martha's Vineyard. Dimly lit, but the faces were unmistakable. Diddy. Barack Obama. A tech CEO. A major news network executive. And a former intelligence director. This meeting, Kash explained, was never disclosed. No press. No agenda. No official guest list. But what was discussed here shaped the next decade. Colfax interjected. This was the birth of the throne plan. Their term, not ours. The idea was to create a post office power structure that couldn't be touched by elections, regulations, or public opinion. The committee members sat in stunned silence as Patel scrolled through more images, whiteboards covered in strategy notes, contracts signed under pseudonyms, internal slides that said things like, control the story, control the outcome. Influence is currency. Visibility is compliance. One slide was titled simply, Shadow Leadership 2020 to 2030, Granger read it aloud. Shadow leadership? Patel nodded. They knew real elections wouldn't guarantee continuity. So they built something above it. Celebrities as culture brokers. Tech moguls as enforcers. Media as clergy. Politicians as faces. But the real decisions? Made right here. He pointed at the screen. They didn't want to run the government, he added. They wanted to run everything around it. Senator Whitman finally spoke. So what are you suggesting we do? Kash leaned in. You don't beat a throne by running against it. You beat it by exposing what it's built on, lies, leverage, and fear. Colfax nodded. And if we don't? They'll just crown the next one. As the committee sat frozen in disbelief, Kash Patel pulled out one final document, stamped classified but now declassified for this testimony. Bold red letters ran across the top, Collapse Contingency Protocol, CCP/17. This, Kash said, was their insurance policy. The document detailed a covert strategy Aurora Global Initiatives and affiliated operatives had developed in the event that any part of their network was exposed. The protocol wasn't just about damage control, it was a full-spectrum response plan to discredit whistleblowers, redirect media narratives, and weaponize civil unrest if necessary. They called it strategic chaos, Patel explained. If the empire cracks, they flood the airwaves with scandal, entertainment drama, tech leaks, anything to blur the lines between fiction and fact. They know that in confusion, there's protection. Colfax added, it even lists names, journalists they've flagged as crisis agents. People who could spin any revelation as a conspiracy or partisan attack. They planned for this. Granger leaned in. So you're telling us they engineered their own defense by controlling perception itself? Yes, Patel replied. And they still have it in place. He tapped the last slide, showing a digital dashboard labeled Sentinel Suite, a data monitoring system connected to social platforms, news outlets, and content moderation pipelines. They know what people are saying, what they're sharing, even what they're searching, in real time. This isn't surveillance for safety. It's surveillance for silence. Senator Whitman looked around the room, eyes narrowing. So what happens if we go public? Colfax didn't hesitate. Expect a firestorm. Smears, threats, denials, celebrity outrage. Maybe worse. Kash leaned back, eyes steady. That's why we're doing this under oath. In full daylight. Before they have time to set the fuse. The screen faded to black. No one said a word. Because they all knew, the collapse had already begun. The next morning, before the committee could finalize its report, the media storm hit. CNN ran a breaking headline, Kash Patel's shadow state claims debunked, experts call it political theater. Entertainment networks rushed to Diddy's defense. Former Obama officials denied ever hearing of Aurora Global initiatives. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #DisinfoDrive and #CashCrash. Talk shows dismissed the hearings as deep state cosplay. It was textbook narrative warfare. But inside the Capitol, the truth was moving faster. Senator Granger convened a private emergency session with select lawmakers from both parties. Kash Patel and Colfax were placed under protection. The contents of the classified binder were submitted to a bipartisan oversight subcommittee. And an encrypted drive, containing the full video files, bank logs, and witness depositions, was quietly transferred to the DOJ's Special Investigations Unit. We're at the detonation point, Patel said behind closed doors. They'll do anything to contain this. But what we have now? It's irreversible. Colfax added, you can't unsee the truth. Even if they try to blind the world. 2 days later, anonymous sources leaked a short clip from one of the Geneva tapes. It was just 22 seconds long, no context, no edits, but the voices were unmistakable. If this ever gets out, it won't. We own the silence. The clip went viral. It was no longer just a committee hearing. It was a reckoning. Protests broke out. Demands for transparency surged. Whistleblowers came forward, not just from media and politics, but from inside Aurora itself. Former staffers. Tech workers. Consultants who had been paid to optimize perception. And then the real shockwave, a sealed indictment was quietly filed in a federal court in D.C. The names weren't public, yet, but the initials in the case summary were enough. SCBO Kash Patel didn't celebrate. He knew what came next would be the hardest part. This isn't the end, he said. It's just the breach in the wall. And now, the truth has a way in. Weeks passed. The initial media frenzy cooled, but something was different. Late-night jokes stopped landing. Carefully crafted denials began sounding hollow. Public trust, once held hostage by celebrity glow and curated narratives, was unraveling. Kash Patel, now under 24/7 federal protection, testified again, this time to a grand jury. Colfax entered witness protection. But before disappearing, he left behind one last gift, a dead man's switch connected to a private server in Iceland. If anything happened to him or Patel, the rest of the files, full, unredacted, would go live worldwide. They weren't bluffing. Congressional hearings were reopened under the name Influence Integrity Review Act. The Aurora Global Initiatives was formally subpoenaed. Multiple tech companies were summoned. A special prosecutor was appointed to investigate multi-sector collusion involving post office political operations and media manipulation. Behind the scenes, celebrities began distancing themselves from Diddy. Contracts were quietly severed. Foundations dissolved overnight. Key Obama-era allies canceled appearances or went silent entirely. Something was shifting. And then, the silence broke. One by one, more whistleblowers stepped forward, a social media executive who oversaw trending algorithm suppression. A Hollywood publicist who coordinated blacklists through encrypted apps. A former campaign manager who confirmed off-the-books PAC activity matching the money trail Kash exposed. Their stories all connected back to the same nucleus, the same shadow structure Kash had called the throne. And America listened. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid to ask questions. To challenge icons. To demand receipts, not slogans. The truth hadn't just surfaced. It had survived. And from that wreckage, a new era was taking shape, one where power had to answer, not just perform. 3 months later, the case that once seemed too explosive to touch reached a historic climax. Live from Washington, D.C., federal prosecutors unsealed the indictment. 7 individuals were named. 2 were global icons. 1 was a former president. The room went silent as the press secretary read the charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, coordinated influence operations, illegal foreign financial interference, evidence tampering, abuse of institutional access. Diddy's legal team issued a panicked response, calling the charges a politically motivated smear. But hours later, his closest business partner quietly cut ties. Stock in his media company plummeted. Endorsements vanished. The throne he built, cracked. As for Barack Obama, his public statement was calm, almost rehearsed: "I believe in due process, and I will cooperate fully." But privately, the fallout was seismic. Major donors pulled back. Former allies deleted tweets. The silence that once protected him now turned on him, loud, relentless, and unforgiving. Meanwhile, Kash Patel addressed the nation in a special hearing streamed globally. This was never about revenge, he said. It was about accountability. Influence is not above the law. And no amount of fame or legacy can shield the truth forever. Across the country, people who once dismissed the claims were now demanding justice. Panels debated not whether it was real, but how it was hidden for so long. Whistleblowers were granted immunity. Investigations expanded to include other administrations. Tech firms scrambled to scrub their names from old contracts. It was no longer about individuals. It was about the system. And the American people had finally seen it for what it was. As the final slide appeared behind Patel, the same triangle from months ago with the words, "They kept the lights off. I'm flipping the switch." He offered one last warning: never again let power exist without question. Because silence is always by design. And with that, the hearing ended. The empire was falling. And the truth, finally, stood alone.